Hello, everybody, and welcome to this bonus episode of The Numbers, our Ontario election reaction episode. Philippe is here with me. How are you feeling the morning after?
Good morning, Eric. Short night. It's okay. Very interesting results last night. I mean, every election is an opportunity to learn and to recalibrate. And we'll talk about it, but the overall provincial numbers were really good. But there were some regional discrepancies and regional surprises that are worth noting, and that will help us recalibrate for future elections, including the federal, which we expect in a few months. So
a few months, maybe a few days.
Well, yeah. Where do you
see.
want to start today, Eric?
Well, we'll start with the big picture, and then we'll get into sort of the weird things that happened by our from our number brain perspective. So overall, the results as of this morning, we have 80 seats for the PCs, 27 for the NDP, 14 for the Liberals, 2 for the Greens, 1 for the Independents. Should mention that there are still some mail ballots and special ballots that I think are going to be counted. So some of the really close ridings, and there are a few that are extremely close, won't be decided yet. Might be by the time you're listening to this or watching this. There was 43% of the vote for the PCs, 29.9 for the Liberals, 18.6 for the NDP, just under 5 for the Greens. So it isn't. Let's start with we'll talk about each of the parties, how the night went, and then we'll talk about the polls. We'll talk about the results. PCs, 80 seats, 43% of the vote. It's a loss of 3 seats compared to the last election, but a gain of about 2.2 percentage points. So bigger mandate, or yes or no?
Oh yeah. It's a win is a win here. They crushed their rivals. Is a
win a win? We're gonna have to check that. I think.
Well, thing is, okay. So if Doug Ford was looking for a bigger mandate, but some of this is posturing. Having 95 seats or having 80 seats in the legislature, there's no difference, really. Yeah. He's just going to have a more reasonable-sized caucus to manage from now on. I mean, it's a clear majority. I mean, again, clear majority in our electoral system. I think a lot of people will discuss electoral reform after this, even though I don't think there's appetite in the two parties that got the most votes.
No, the two parties that got the most seats.
The NDP really overperformed in seats with respect to how much vote they got. They lost. I said when I went to bed last night, I wrote on social media they lost a quarter of their vote. It's not quite right. They went up to almost 19%, so they lost a fifth of their vote provincially. Yet they held on to most of their seats and even increased their margins in some regions in Niagara and Oshawa. And so this is, I guess, good for those MPPs, but it shows how much the New Democrats have fallen elsewhere. They lost 200,000 votes in this election. And in 2022, they had lost 800,000 votes. So that's 1 million votes that you lose in 2 consecutive elections. But locally, they have great get-out-the-vote machines and local candidates that can make a difference.
Yeah. So for the PCs, it is still remarkable, though, that they went up in the vote, right? This is their 3rd consecutive election victory. Yes, they dropped a couple seats, but they still got more of the vote than they did last time. So I think that has to be kind of respected, that they were able to do that after 7 years in power. So the NDP gets 27 seats, official opposition status, as you said, with 18.6% of the vote. Let's not get into the numbers just yet, just the overall picture of it.
Okay.
It's a good night for the NDP because they get to be official opposition. They've never had that role 3 times in a row. Right. At this point, though, you got to start doing something with it. But the fact that they were able to win 27 seats, despite the loss, as you said, they dropped about 5 percentage points from the last election.
Yeah.
Marit Stiles still, I mean, they have to be happy with it, right? The NDP targeted what they wanted, and they won what they wanted. They would have liked a bit more, but as in terms of being able to run an election and do the best that you can with what you got, they kind of did that.
Yeah, But again, reality. What is the equation of happiness? It's reality minus expectations, right? If your expectations are low enough, yeah, you'll be happy. So third straight elections where they win official opposition, yeah, but they drop seats in the last two elections and drop again 1 million votes in two elections. Even though they are the official opposition, they're further away from power than they were 6 years ago or 7 years ago. So if your expectation for the New Democrats is to be the conscience of the parliament, to be an eternal opposition party, yeah, okay, you're happy you beat the Liberals, but the Liberals had 600,000 more votes than you. And if you look at, again, the big picture of these results, I was asked, one day the PCs will lose, right? It will lose one day, breaking.
I don't know. Ford said he wants to be premier forever.
But when you look at these numbers, when the PCs eventually lose, it's not the New Democrats that will beat them unless there's a huge turnaround.
I don't know. What's the lowest share of the vote you can still win an election with? I mean, we might find out one day with the NDP. They'll keep going down, and then the seats will go up. For the Liberals, 29.9% of the vote, so they're up about 5 points.
Yep.
They won 14 seats,
points,
so they get recognized party status, which they really wanted. Bonnie Crombie is not one of those 14 seats. And she says she's going to stay on. We'll see how that's going to work.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Was it? You said reality. What was it? Reality minus expectations?
Yeah.
I think the expectations were a little higher for the Liberals. So I think even though they finished second in the vote, they got back recognized party status. I think that they are not that happy today.
Yeah. Well, it's worth noting, again, the NDP got to the ceiling of my projection. My projection for the Liberals was 14 seats, and they got 14. Not the exact 14. I said they did much better in Ottawa and much worse in the the GTA. I mean, they got 0 in the GTA, right?
I think they were ahead in Ajax. I think that was the only one.
Oh, that's right. That's Ajax. But that's the only one. So, and it was a very close win in Ajax, right? I see 300 votes. But you have the former mayor of Mississauga, and you lose all Mississaugas. You lose all Brentons. It's not a good night for the Liberals. But again, if you tell your team we had 30% of the vote, there is something to build on, right? A few more points in the next election, and suddenly all these close seats fall your way. There is something to build on for the Liberals, even though yes, they must be disappointed. But man, that 905 just is a killer for the Liberals.
Well, I think I saw it in Queen's Park Observer. Sabrina and Angie had it in her newsletter this morning that some Liberals were saying Carney got you to 30% and not Bonnie Crombie. And when you look at the results in Mississauga, the Liberals didn't actually do that much better in Mississauga. Nope. They got a couple points up, but Mississauga East Cooksville, where Bonnie Crombie was running, wasn't in the end the best riding for them or for her. They got a lot closer in Mississauga Erin Mills. So was there really a Bonnie bump?
Nope,
it doesn't seem like it. It seemed like the increase in Mississauga was about on par with their increase across the province, right? So it wasn't really her vote that really propelled them forward. So I doubt that she's still leading this party into the 2029 election or the 2028 election if Ford wants to go in another 3 years. And we'll close with the two other two other folks represented. I don't know how we're saying it. Two Greens and one Independent.
Yeah.
The Greens actually got pretty close in Prairie Sound Muskoka, closer than I thought they would. And at one point in the evening, they were actually ahead, I think, in that riding, or behind by just like a handful of votes.
Yeah.
While they managed to hold on to Kitchener Centre and do it in a pretty,
convincing, very
convincing fashion. Yeah. I still think this is a disappointing result for them. Their vote has come down from the last election, and they didn't end up winning that third seat. So it feels like a lost election a little bit for them.
Yeah, the Prairie Sound Muskoka was a 5-point win for the PCs in 22, and now it's a 5-point win. But this time there was a Liberal candidate. Yeah. So can you say it's an improvement? Yeah, you hang around there. This is something to watch when the PCs eventually go down, because again, they will one day. this could be very well a Green seat. And we know that when the Greens, it makes me think of Québec Solidaire in Quebec, when the Greens hold on to a riding, they really hold on to it. I mean, the result, I mean, I had Kitchener Center going Green, but not by this margin. She had more than 50% of the vote. And talking to some folks on the ground, journalists, they all said, well, it should be Green, but we could label it a toss-up, right? She won by 27 points. So this is a solidly Green riding now, federally and provincially, which is interesting.
Hold them in Norfolk. I think they should change the name of that riding to Bobby Ann Brady or something.
Oh, the Brady riding.
Since you like ridings named after people so much.
Oh, how dare you!
I'm not surprised she won. I thought she would win, but she won like 2/3 of the vote.
Yeah,
like
64%.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That is a surprising result. And actually, this is what I find really interesting about this election, is that it was very much an incumbents election. If you were an incumbent, you did really well. If you weren't an incumbent, people didn't care who you were. There's 124 ridings across the province. We saw lots of changes in the polls. There's like a 10-point swing between the Liberals and the NDP. I will list off all the seats that flipped. It won't take long. These are the seats that were PC that went to the Liberals. Nepean, Ajax, Don Valley North, Etobicoke Lakeshore. That went from the NDP to the Liberals. Toronto Centre. That went to the PCs from the NDP. Hamilton Mountain, Algoma, Manitoulin. That's it. Those are the only ridings that changed. 7 ridings in all.
Wow.
And Ford gets 80 seats. He had 79 at dissolution.
Yeah.
The NDP had what? They were like 29 at dissolution or something like that. Why do we have this election? We could have just said, let's just do another 4 years, everybody. Give the Liberals a little bit of more funding at Queen's Park, and let's just not have the election. What's the point? It was such a status quo election, wow. and if people recognize the name on the ballot, they voted for it.
Absolutely. Respect to Wayne Gates. Wayne Gates in Niagara Falls went up to 55% of the vote in his riding. Talk about a candidate that has a local bonus, right? The regional numbers we had from the Hamilton Niagara region did not suggest that the NDP would go up in that region. The polls, again, we'll get to the polls. They were not all of them were good, but they were reasonably close to the mark, but not regionally.
I'm going to look forward to looking through the regional numbers. Because let's just talk about how the polls did in general. So 43% for the PCs. I think my average had them at 45. I don't know where yours was, but
I was at 45.6, so I rounded to 46.
So that was the consensus in the polls, and they underperformed, which is interesting that they underperformed. The Liberals, I think I had them at 29. I think I might have had them at 29.9 or 29.7. So that was pretty much on the mark. And the NDP overperformed a little bit. They were somewhere more around the 17% mark, and they ended up closer to 19. So that's kind of the only thing that was off in the polls, that the PCs underperformed by about 2 points. The NDP overperformed by 2 points. And that explains a little bit of the seats. Do you disagree?
Well, the NDP got right. I see here 18.6% for the NDP. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I had them at 18. So the thing is, I wonder, so this is a rare occasion where the Conservative Party underperformed with respect to the average of polls, right? By 2, maybe 2.5 points. Why is that? Because usually that doesn't happen. I think, I'm going to have to dig in a little bit more. Hypotheses.
Okay.
The Conservatives lead among young voters. This is flipped. Young voters in the last few decades have been more left-leaning to the NDP. Is it possible that the PCs underperformed because they are supported also by young voters who turn out in lesser numbers? I should say, since we're talking about the polls, Eric, the IVRs did very well.
They did well.
Palace, Main Street. Main Street, they will admit that their local polls were off.
Not that helpful.
Not that helpful. But the provincial numbers are right on it. Liaison Strategies, Main Street, and Palace all did very well, and Forum as well. Forum as well.
Blast from the past.
So the idea, the IVRs did well. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it isn't.
You know what I think it is? A low turnout election where only the most engaged go out to vote. I think IVRs will do better in that because IVRs would get answered by the most kind of engaged and the most interested in politics. So when turnout ended up being somewhere around 45.
Yeah.
So we just barely didn't set a new record.
It got over? It got over the last time? Okay.
Yeah. But like when turnout is that low, it is going to be the most engaged people. So I think when you get an election with a turnout at 65, 70, then the polls that maybe are getting more of the general population might do a better job than the IVRs. But I think also when you have that kind of low turnout with more enthusiastic voters, they're probably also more, how am I going to put this? They're probably more voters who are understanding how the race is unfolding. And so you'll have more strategic voting, and you'll have more people that are getting behind the candidate they think is the best to win the riding, which I think might have been an explanation of why the NDP would do so well and why the PCs, they still did really well. But I wonder how many PC voters said, Ford's got this in the bag.
Looking at some ridings, we mentioned earlier Oshawa. I had the numbers. I'm going to pull this up because to make sure I don't say anything stupid. But Oshawa was won by the NDP in 22 by a margin of less than 2 points. Like was 1.9%, right? So considering Oshawa, of course, is GTA, it's extended GTA, right, to the east, of course. But considering the swings we saw provincially and the numbers we had in the GTA, no way the NDP was holding on to this. So. So strategic voting, maybe strong local candidates, strong local campaigns. I believe all of it, right? So the result was 46 NDP, 42 Conservatives in that riding. Very interesting. Same thing with I think St. Catharines was the same, where the margins did not follow the trends. Again, this is an occasion for learning and recalibrate. Gonna have to recalibrate with a federal NDP in Ontario here. Like not, I know it's not the same, but you have to consider that the NDP does well in local races. They don't do well provincially. Again, they lost 1 million votes in 2 elections, but they kept most of their support locally. So an occasion to learn.
Yeah, that's when. Okay, so now this brings us to talking about that NDP vote efficiency. Now, both of our projections had the NDP doing a lot worse than this, right? I think I had them winning 14 seats. And on my upper band had them in the low 20s. To win 27 with 18.6% of the vote. Okay, so there was at least 3 ridings where my own projections did not really have the NDP in the running, and the NDP ended up winning. All right, and I want to go through them because I made some notes. So these were Humber River, Black Creek, which was so close that we might have to wait to see how the outcome would be. In this riding, which is in Toronto, the NDP's vote went up by a point. Okay, the NDP's vote across Toronto went down by like 7. The PCs went up by 5. The Liberals went up by 3. In the next door ridings to Humber River, Black Creek, the NDP lost 8 points in York Centre, 8 points in York Southwestern, 5 points in Etobicoke North, 4 points in Thornhill, and 1 point in Vaughan Woodbridge. So in the neighboring ridings to Humber River, Black Creek, where Tom Rakosevich was the incumbent, the NDP dropped an average of like 5 points, but he ended up increasing by 1. This continues. Oshawa, the NDP vote went up by about 4 points. In next door Durham, their vote went down by 4 points. And in next door Whitby, which is not all that different from Oshawa, the NDP vote went down 15 points. Wow. You can look at Thunder Bay, Superior North, obviously in Northern Ontario. The NDP vote went up by 7 points. In the next door Thunder Bay riding, Thunder Bay Atikokan, the NDP vote went down 7 points. And if you look at some of the other ridings where they have incumbents, so Kiiwetinoong, they went up 3 points. Timiskaming Cochrane up 1 point. Sudbury up 5 points. Ottawa West Nepean up 11 points. Wow. Niagara Falls up 7 points. St. Catharines and Niagara Centre up 2.5 points. London West up 5. London North Centre up 7. Windsor West up 10.
Yeah,
and University Rosedale up 9. In an election where the NDP vote went down by a fifth, as you said,
Yeah.
in these ridings where they had incumbents, they went up. And for us who do seat projections, this is very, very, very hard to to predict from larger numbers, because the whole idea behind seat projections is always you swing the results from the last election based on the regional swing. But in this election, the NDP in a region, their vote went down. Where they had an actual incumbent, in a lot of cases, their vote went up. And it's very hard to be able to predict that is going to happen.
So interesting. I mean, I have to say,
it's incredible. I was just flabbergasted last night seeing these numbers with what the NDP was putting up.
Yeah. I had the NDP competitive in 28 ridings, and they won 27. I had the NDP leading in, I think it was 16, but there, I mean, considering like 1 point swings, it was closer to 19, 20. But 28 was the absolute ceiling, and they got 27. And so they put their resources where they had a chance. But look at the bigger picture. That means, as you said, they tanked everywhere else.
Yeah,
so,
they had, when I was looking at one point in the night, in the GTA, they had 8%. 8% in the GTA, and they still won Oshawa.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. And I don't know where the numbers ended up, but at one point in the night, I tallied it up. The NDP was in first place in, whatever, there are 27 ridings, whatever it was. They were in second in like another 10.
Yeah.
The Liberals were in second place in about 75 ridings.
Yep.
So we talked about what could happen if they ended up not beating the NDP in the seat count, is that they could finish second in a lot of places, and they did.
They absolutely
so you had a uniform vote for the Liberals, because they were kind of up everywhere by like 5 points.
Yeah.
But the PCs are also up a couple points, and so what you have here is just a lesson in vote efficiency, probably one of the most stark ones I've ever seen. I can't think of another one where the vote was this penalizing, and in a surprising way. I've seen people mention the Quebec election where you had 4 parties with roughly the same amount of vote, so different seats, but that wasn't a surprise. We kind of knew how their regional numbers worked out. But here it's just in one part of Toronto, their votes went up, and the next the street over, their vote went down. It's just remarkable.
I love it. This is so interesting, but it's too bad though for the turnout. It's really too bad.
At least it wasn't down again.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't. Yeah, but you can't. That's a crazy silver lining. You can't be happy with a 45% turnout. Mm-hmm. But let's hope that Ontarians care again. We'll see in the federal. I mean, the federal usually was what 60-65% in Ontario.
Yeah, I think it'll be higher. It'll be higher.
Yeah. Oh,
we had used this over under before. Now I think you're going to slam. You're going to slam the under whether the federal NDP will win more or fewer seats than the Ontario NDP in the federal election. I don't think Jagmeet Singh's getting 27 seats in Ontario.
No, I don't think so either. But we have to. I'll dig into it, as I said. We have to revisit some of these, considering local races. Perhaps the NDP is stronger than we think, even though it seems that they're tanking everywhere else. Mm-hmm. Going from 18% in the election for the federal NDP to maybe 12 or 13%, that's a third of your vote. Perhaps in where they have strong local candidates, they're holding strong and they're just tanking everywhere else. So something to look closely at in the next cycle, and I know I will recalibrate my numbers. So
So it was a big win for Doug Ford, and the same kind of map as last time. For geeks like us, the most interesting thing is these weird results at the regional level. But overall, it was a good night for the PCs, and once again, I just say that it is remarkable to see a party increase its vote share 7 years into an election. So kudos to the PC team. They had a plan for this election, and it worked out pretty well. Didn't get that bigger mandate. I heard that when Ford did his speech, he said he asked voters for a mandate. He dropped that bigger mandate, but he won his mandate. So congratulations, Doug Ford, and congratulations to all the 124 MPPs going to Queen's Park and everybody else who ran in this election. It ended up being the most interesting part of the election. Ended up being election night, which is always the most fun.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that'll be it for this quick episode, just with our reaction to the results. We'll be back next week with our normal episode. And Philippe, we've chatted a lot this week. And
yes, always a pleasure, Eric. Always a pleasure.
We'll chat again in another 7 days.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon, Eric. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Have a great week.